welcome to our audience today. This is the June 2025 BusPlanner webinar series, and we have a couple of fantastic guests today. I'm Scott Denton. I work with BusPlanner on a part-time basis, and have been helping Benford Sloan and BusPlanner with some sales and marketing and some implementation activities. So today we thought we would talk about things that are not necessarily specific to BusPlanner, but things that I think everybody in the industry probably has dealt with at one time or another. And that is, when you want to change something, how do you go about doing that? And what people have to be brought on board, and how does that work? And we'll talk about some things that are related to what's coming up and what these folks see in the future. So let's introduce these fine folks. I'll start with who's on my left. That's Mr. Rodney Hardy. I met Rodney many years ago. He and I both attended NCPTA, which is the North Carolina People Transportation Association forums, and got to know each other pretty much that way, and other statewide meetings. And Rodney's been in the business quite a long time. He served as a transportation director in Surrey County Schools, and I'll let him talk about what his background is and how he got into transportation and what he's doing these days.
Thank you, Scott. It's a privilege to be here today. So welcome, everyone. Began my career coming out of college with the North Carolina Department of Transportation and planning maintenance activities for the county. I did that for 13 years, and my dad called me one day and he said, there's a school bus transportation director position open with the school district. You ought to apply. And didn't even know it was open. And I applied, and 18 years later, I was able to retire. When I began my career there, we were a medium-sized district in North Carolina with 133 buses. And when I retired 2 years ago, we had 84. So we kind of transitioned into a smaller district. So it was rewarding. It was one of the best jobs I've ever had. And it's kind of led into what I'm doing now after retirement. Started getting phone calls from consulting companies, and for the last 2 years, I've been helping school districts here in North Carolina. I'm certainly not an expert. I've learned from other districts as much as I've kind of offered input, and it's been very rewarding.
Well, Rodney, I beg to differ. I think you are an expert in different things, and I've really enjoyed our relationship over the years, and I appreciate you as a friend and a person that really does like to help people. And I think that's what we all three share in common. We enjoy helping people, which gets me over to Ms. Deb Trafton. Deb is our second guest today. She is the transportation director for New Hanover County Public Schools in North Carolina. And Deb has a very interesting background as well, different background. Deb, talk about how you got started in transportation and how you ended up where you are.
Thanks, Scott. It's also my pleasure to be here today. New Hanover County Schools is the 12th largest district in the state, and my journey with New Hanover County Schools started in human resources. That's my background. When I moved to North Carolina in 2005 and had my kids growing out in the schools, I joined HR back then and worked with the classified staff. So I really got to know a lot of the players in the operations department. And when COVID hit, it really had quite an impact on our staffing, especially in transportation. So we went from 135 drivers to under 100. And that really affected our operations. And there was a position that became open as assistant director. It was a new position for transportation. And that's where I came in. And my main role was to help with recruitment and retention. And, it's funny because when you go to from human resources into a different department, people kind of look at you funny, like, uh-oh, what is she doing here? What's going to happen?
Yes.
But really the goal was to grow and certainly not to do anything that would impact the staff in a negative way. So it It's not something I ever imagined myself doing, but the people here are incredible. They're so dedicated, and it's very easy to want to support everyone in transportation, and help kids get to school. And I've learned so much, and I just feel like this is a new start, and I can't wait to just keep moving on and doing great things for the district.
Well, Deb, when I visited you all, Deb and I met through a consulting arrangement, and I was so impressed with the way New Hanover County Schools has changed a lot of things about how they operate, and it's very, very clear to me when I go down when I went down to visit with Deb, her staff really likes uh, how she runs that department, and she has a lot of support from both the top down as well as from the bottom up, and that says a lot about your leadership, Deb, and look forward to hearing more about that today. So next slide, please, Mabad. So yeah, so we're gonna look at a few things today. How we go about setting the table for organizational change, and I think something often overlooked is gaining staff confidence, and we talk about some of those things, not just from from as we mentioned top down. We all know that we have to get the higher ups to buy into what we want to do to change things. What I think we all sometimes can overlook a little bit is the importance of getting on board your bus drivers and your routing staff and your operations people and your mechanical staff. Those folks are critical to the success of whatever changes you put in place. So we'll talk some about that, and we'll go into the role of technology a little bit, talk about how technology has changed some, and then we'll look ahead and then talk about some takeaways, and then of course at the end answer some questions. So, Bob, if you'll roll the next slide for us, that'd be great. So, Deb, let me start with you. When you came director of your school district, what were the obvious challenges you faced coming in to that new role?
The biggest one was getting buy-in from everyone, that an HR person could come and make effective change in a field that I really had no prior experience. And of course, the way to do that is to be patient and just start collecting data and start getting to know people. It was also a time when we were transitioning out of COVID. So we operationally had to make some big changes. And we started doing community stops just as I was coming on board in transportation. And that was something that we definitely had to continue doing because of our bus driver shortage. So I would say the biggest challenge really was just getting the buy-in, not just from the staff, but also from principals who knew me in a different way, helping them with classified hiring to, oh, is she going to know enough about transportation? But of course, if you can lead people, you don't need to know all the details of everybody's specific roles. You just need to know how to get people to perform at their peak and to do the work that they can succeed in, that they can excel in and shine. And so identifying those things is what got us here today, which is being able to cover runs with a driver and mechanic shortage. Limited.
I think what you say about that is so true. You had a platform, and so did I when I came to work in my last stop in Union County, North Carolina. You mentioned the pandemic, and that gave us somewhat of a platform to be able to make some changes, which is good because parents are going to complain about changes and employees are going to complain about changes, but ultimately you hit on the most important part of it, and that is working with your employees and gaining their confidence. And I applaud you for having done that. Rodney, you were in a different situation and coming in from a state agency, no prior transportation experience either. What were the obvious challenges you faced when you transitioned from that role?
Well, the first obstacle that I faced was employee morale. Apparently, there was some unrest with the previous person that was in my position at the time. A lot of changes had been made, no trust at all with the employees. And of course, we had a huge funding issue. Local dollars were supporting the transportation operation around $300,000 a year. So, but the central office, the superintendent, all he wanted was harmony at the bus garage. That's all they wanted the first year. So luckily, I had time. They didn't even really want me to make any changes, but just to gain trust with the employees. And it took a while to really understand the issues. Even though I was in transportation with Department of Transportation for 13 years, it's completely different. I was transporting dirt in those 13 years to go into transporting our most our children. I mean, it's just something that was completely different, and understanding those issues took a little while, but luckily they gave me that time. So that was great that my administration had patience, which was much needed.
So I know you guys have heard this before, and the folks that are in an organization who were wanting to go into your job, the job that you got, but they were passed over for you because you were a selected candidate. They probably had this saying in mind, and I know you guys have heard it 100 times. I got to train another one, right? Because they see it as they're a little bit bitter and didn't get the opportunity, and someone else got it. How did you all deal with those issues? Right now, I'll go with you first.
Did you say me? I'm sorry.
Either one's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I did a listening tour, and I was really lucky in my timing. The superintendent and Rodney, I shared some of your same experience where there were trust issues, and moving from assistant director to director was because the director left kind of abruptly, and so there was, like you said, a little unrest. But I was really lucky in that the superintendent had arranged for an outside consultant to come in and have an expert in transportation listen to what was going on and what was on everyone's mind and go over our best practices. And I got to see the results of that study and have the ability to understand what the major concerns were from staff. And I shared some of those same concerns. Are we ready for this? Where do we go from here? And that's why it was important that I remain patient and not make major waves that first year, and just try to collect the data and figure out the why, and ask everyone to ask themselves that question. I know you've been doing it this way. Why? Do you know why? Because if your answer is it's the way we've always done it, then we need to revisit that, and revisit it quick if we're going to make things better here.
Yeah, I think the why question, Deb, is something that I've always tried to focus on in any job I was in. I've always said this: if employees don't understand why something's being done, they're going to make up their own why, and most of the time that's not going to be a favorable thing. It's going to be a negative thing. And so that's been my experience. And so I think whether folks agree or disagree with you, explaining the why behind things can be very, very critical in getting that buy-in. What were some of your major challenges coming in, as a brand new director?
Well, luckily I didn't have the issue of someone there at the department that had applied and didn't get the position. So I didn't have that kind of hanging over my head. It was easier to move on. Everybody, after a little while, seemed to start jumping on board. And, and you do that by spending individual time with those employees, learning about even what's going on at home. You've got to understand, kind of where they're coming from. I have worked with other school districts since I have retired, and it's in one case it's happened, and it's very difficult for the employee that's still there that felt like they should have deserved the job to get over that and to move forward. It's really hard to get that person on board, and it just takes time. Time heals wounds, and sometimes you can say too much. You just need to listen to that person vent, and that's all they need. That's all they need to hear, and they just need an ear to talk to. And that's kind of the role I play when I see that when I'm assisting other school districts.
One of the things that happened when I was in union, guys, I went the pandemic had just started, so we were out of school for a period of time before we even had buses back on the road. And part of what we focused on during that time was process and how are we actually operating? What are we doing? And is everybody doing it the same way? And I think bringing staff in and allowing them to participate in that process building, in that process rewrite, so to speak, helped them know, first of all, their input was valuable. And then secondly, it helped them to see where we were going. It helped them understand what the vision was going forward. I'm curious about process for you all and any kind of changes you may have made. What low-hanging fruit did you attack first, and then how did you expand on that? I mean, a lot of time quick wins are what you need to gain employee confidence. You need to get something that's positive. You need to get something going that the employees can buy into. They see the result. It's maybe something they've wanted to have happen for a while and nobody could pull it off before. What are those type things, one or two that you guys maybe had experience with in your own organizations?
Well, I can take that one, Deb, right quick. I'll go first. You got to continue valuing relationships. That's the first thing that I did when I got there, because you've got to gain the trust. If you don't have their trust, you will never be a great leader. And so all genuine leadership is built on trust. And so that's the one thing, that's the low-hanging fruit that I had to attack first, is making sure that they trust me, because obviously the trust wasn't there. And employees, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Once they know that you care about them, then they will tend to follow. And they can't give you their hand until they see your heart. So that's a couple of things that I always try to stick to. And because if you don't have the followers behind you, you're not going to achieve the long-term results that you're seeking. So the low-hanging fruit for me was the trust issue.
Fantastic. Deb?
Yeah, same. Absolutely. You can't get people to follow if they're not sure who they're following. You've got to make sure that they know that you care about them. And that was one of the things coming over here. What I kept hearing over and over again was everybody said we just had to do. We say yes to everything. We never say no. And
that's so true.
And why is that? So advocating for our folks, that was a personal mission of mine, and it had to come through communication. And we started having meetings, small meetings with every staff member. We called them a chance to talk. And it was a safe place for employees just to share their concerns. And their biggest concern was always like, we don't feel valued, because no one really truly understood the pressure and the demand that comes along with being a driver or mechanic. So those little meetings, they evolved into, well, now we have to have those meetings with anyone who is on a school site. So if you were a new admin in a transportation role, or you just didn't have practices that really were jiving with what we were trying to do, we went to every single school, and we continued with that practice. And of course, not having the transportation experience that I'm sure a lot of other directors have, it was important for me to talk to my neighboring partners and reach out to people like Marlon Watson and Lloyd Willis and ask the questions like, hey, do you guys do this? Why do you do that? And how do you build the trust, not just with your employees, but with the schools? If we don't have each other's backs, we're not going to make any progress. So we were able to do a lot of quick things once we had those meetings behind us. And again, it goes back to the buy-in, and just totally revamping our website, being more transparent with families so that they knew this is how you ask for transportation. This is what you're going to get. If you want to follow the bus, do this. A lot of those things were very superficial when I got here, and we just really went in and dug deep and just built on what was there, and made that a priority. So the communication was our tool to get the trust and the buy-in.
Fantastic. So you all probably had some unexpected obstacles along the way. Can you think of anything that comes to mind that you were surprised about when you mean maybe you thought I'm never going to say you thought it was going to be easy because we all know transportation is not an easy business, and that's not you don't go into that business thinking you're going to have an easy job, but there may have been some surprises that you just didn't realize would come up as being larger than what you thought they would be. Is anything come to mind for either of you?
Yeah, for me right away, it's the budget cuts. Um, we had, despite our vacancies, I had to cut positions, which I just, that I never would have imagined was going to happen in our department, just because everybody knows we have a driver shortage. But our district was faced with some budget issues that we had to take part of. Again, buy-in. Our superintendent asked the same of me of what we were asking of him and everybody else in central office. Like, we got to work together. So we had to make some tough decisions on which positions would cut. And of course, that cut services to children, but schools faced it. We had to do our part too.
What about for you? Anything jump off the table as being unexpected?
Well, most of the time it's something out of your control. For instance, modified schedules with EC children, or even behavioral issues in the classroom, to where I'm seeing more modified schedules, and you'll see that more in the urban districts in North Carolina than you will in the rural districts. But that can be a budget nightmare because you have no control over that whatsoever, none at all. And it can wreck your budget. And then now you're pulling in contractors. You're having to have buses sit around waiting for the next 2-hour modified schedule, and it's very, very difficult to be an efficient operation when you're not calling the shots on these modified schedules. And a lot of times you can suggest things to where, hey, instead of 10 o'clock, I've got a bus that's rolling out at 10:30 over here. Can we push that back 30 minutes? And most of the time you'll get that help a little bit. Of course, most of the time we all are funded to and from, and these middays is causing an extra run is not factored into our formula. And it's just eating away at what you're trying to accomplish with employees, such as Deb's having to let people go because she has no control over what's going on in the classroom.
Right.
But we're here to serve. We're here to serve what's going on in the classroom. And that's one of the issues that I kept telling my people at the garage is, if it wasn't for the kids, we wouldn't be here. So whatever they need is what we're going to do, whether we like it or not. And that's what we're here to do, is to serve and keep those children safe.
So as we talk through this whole idea of organizational change, what is either of you believe was the most significant change you've made thus far in your career? And maybe there's more than one. You can talk through a couple things if you can think of them. But I'm curious about what and how did that go, and did it meet your expectation? I guess I'm curious about that.
Well,
I can start. Oh, go.
No,
Rodney.
please go ahead.
The biggest change here has been changing the culture from kind of being complicit and comfortable with just doing things the way they are, don't rock the boat, to no, let's go ahead and become more modern. Let's go ahead and trust that making changes in our operations in the end is going to give us a better work-life balance. It's going to improve our efficiency. It's going to improve our services. So I inherited a department that's the average, I won't say the average age, but it's a demographic where we're just now seeing a lot of people who are going to retire. So people who've joined this department have been here for a long time, and change is uncomfortable. But there's so many things that are available now. Technology has grown, and I know we'll get to technology later, but changing the culture of doing things solely by paper and just kind of old school, to pushing us forward. You gotta buy in, you gotta trust, and know that in the end, those growing pains, not everything works. So, there's trial and error too. And we've tried some things that have bombed, but if you can get that one thing that's going to make life better for everybody and improve services for kids, well, then, it's worth the pain.
I think it's very interesting that you didn't jump to a project. You jumped to culture. You could have chosen to talk about the different projects that you've had ongoing and the different things that have changed, but you chose to talk about culture because that's what drives the ability to put all those projects in place. And that's I mean, that's a very, very significant takeaway for people that are joining us today is that if you don't have the right culture for change, your changes aren't going to be well received and not going to be effective as they could be. Rodney, how about for you?
Yeah, when I walked in the door my first day, I walked into a veteran group. It's much easier to cultivate a change of direction with new people, but I had a veteran group and they were dug in, and I tried to tell them it's a we approach, not a me approach, and once they saw that I was going to listen and take their input and kind of help make my decisions. And sometimes I made decisions they didn't like, but of course we couldn't give raises out left and right, but you would do little things. Hey, Friday's a slow day. There's no school. It's a work day. Let's have a cookout. Let's get some hamburgers and hot dogs. Let's do a cookout. Let's just kind of slow down a little bit, just little things. Hey, you guys, you could leave in a couple hours early today. Just little things that if you gave back, that didn't cost you any money, it kind of got them on the wagon a little bit quicker. Sure did.
Ronnie, you mentioned a word that I mean, my experience has always been just something that how many times you've been in a meeting and your employees say y'all are doing this to us, y'all are doing that, and I always used to try to say we're not y'all, it's we, it's us, and that's different than us versus them, or the employees seeing themselves as a different group. If we can all agree that we're we and we're here to do a job, and that result is getting kids to and from school, then I think that culture thing, Deb, starts to make a turn. Mm-hmm. If you can get those folks to not say y'all, but say we, and be thinking that way, then to me that's one of the biggest culture shifts that you can get. So, well, Bob, next slide, if you don't mind, please, sir. We'll move on. We've talked about this building staff confidence already. Pardon me, guys. I've had a bit of a cold over the past couple of weeks, and I'm just trying to get over it. So. I think we've talked about staff confidence, but let's move on to the next one, just so we can have some time for technology, because I think that's, technology's just grown so rapidly in my time and I tell people all the time, I know I'm old, but I think technology in my lifetime has been the greatest change of anything in our lifetime. It has allowed us to change more in business and personal life and whatever else. It's just allowed us to be much more changing in our entire lifetimes, and that's significant to me because obviously it improves. And Deb, you mentioned a few minutes ago that work-life balance. You're trying to get people to not work 12-hour days every day, because transportation will eat your time alive. It'll take every minute that you will give it, and so finding efficiencies through technology is a significant thing to try to do. What are you guys seeing right now with technology you're using, and what are you putting in place now, and what are you looking for? How do you feel like technology has impacted where you're at and where you're going, I guess is the question.
Well,
Rodney, you want to go first?
I will. In 2005, when I first joined the industry, we were doing paper timesheets for drivers. And our GPS was something called shadow trackers, to where you had to go out and pull the device off the bus, bring it in and download. and it was very difficult to download. And sometimes you got something and sometimes you didn't. So that went on for a few years before we finally, I thought GPS was life changing when it came to the transportation industry. GPS has really turned everything around with bus transportation, school bus transportation especially when you can also kind of tie in driver pay where they can sign in and sign out on the bus. That is what is kind of driving everything now. We've always had the routing software, at least back in the 90s when it first started. Routing software has always been there, but when we added the GPS to show what we were doing compared to the plan, to me was a game changer, big time.
Rodney, how did you deal with, because what happens when you start using that GPS is you find out that maybe some of your drivers weren't being as truthful on their time as they might otherwise have been. So now you ended up having to cut time in an environment where you're trying to hold on to drivers. So how did you all face that and deal with that?
Well, it's really interesting how that's transitioned from the early 2000s to the 2020s. Back then, you didn't really tolerate much at all. I mean, if you saw some 20 minutes of padding time or sitting in the parking lot, we had umpteen drivers sitting on the sideline. You pretty much let people go. I mean, right. It's just like, if you can't get on board, you're gone.
You're
and
right.
We let people go. And now we tolerate much more where at least there's somebody in the seat. We have somebody in the seat. If you let that person go, I mean, you still gonna have that discussion with them that, hey, I need you to get on board. I need you to follow the expectations that I have of the pre-trip time, and it's time to hit the road. However, if it doesn't take place, you're a little bit more accommodating with that employee than you would have been 20 years ago, because there's nobody standing in line. And I see it in every school district I go into. It's there, and it's hard to deal with that when you really don't have anybody that you can replace them with. And I think drivers know that now. They're a very valuable commodity that we just can't afford to lose. So all you can do is continue to coach them up. You just got to coach them up.
Oh, how quickly we forget that back then we did have. I can remember the days when we had drivers waiting. They wanted a route and they would be glad to get one. And boy, it seems like those days are gone. We just don't have that anymore. And I just reminisce a little bit, Rodney, because I can remember back when I had that same issue, and we had plenty of drivers. So, Deb, what about for you on the technology side? What are you doing now, and what are you seeing upcoming?
Well, Rodney, like you, I wasn't here before GPS was introduced, or the routing software. We were joking with some staff members last week at the conference that our routing team, they had the big old map. And they would sit there with their highlighted pens and their Sharpies, and that's how they did it. And they wrote it on yellow pads of paper. So there's a lot of technology that has improved the work of the router and the supervisor with the GPS, knowing the time. But I would say right now we are relying on all-in-one platform technology, especially things that are revolving around cameras. And the camera technology helps us, especially these all-in-one platforms where you have telematics, where you can be at your desk as a supervisor or a coordinator or a director and single-handedly investigate concerns, especially surrounding safety, from the comfort of your desk, because you've got camera on clouds that you could just pop in, see what's going on, whether it's, God forbid, an accident, but any kind of safety concern. You could do student head counts. You can see which kids were fighting. You could see if a complaint we have so many neighborhood watch citizens. We're so thankful, but they do call all the time and say, I think your driver may have been on the phone. I think your driver may have gone through an amber light, so all of those observations now can be done using the camera systems from your desk, and from anywhere. It doesn't have to be in the office. You could be remote. And that really just saves on time and allows you to have instantaneous information that you can address things really quickly. And that's all safety driven in my mind. And of course, the routing software has come a long way. And anything that we can do to improve our services so that we are relying less on people doing things manually or doing things not as efficiently as they can be done, is going to help our overall operations. And if you've got routers that have to route but also drive and also answer the phone and also go to an IEP meeting and also do this, that, and the other thing, if you have technology that can streamline all that and put it in one little nice area, like one little package for you, I'm all about it. And that's where, again, back to the buy-in and the communication. So like you said earlier, Rodney, I also don't like to make decisions without getting the input from who I think are the experts, and those are the people who've been here forever. They know better than I. They have all the experience. Like they've seen every day in transportation, and they can, maybe they'll feel uncomfortable about it, but they're open-minded enough to know what that technology is that's going to save them a few minutes at the end of the day to go home and be with their families, or to concentrate on just one aspect of their job instead of trying to be the master of 15 different tasks. They can be the master of one.
You know what's been really fascinating to me is that now we have trained our parents, at least a lot of districts have, to rely on an app when the bus is going to arrive and where the bus is. And boy, you put it out there, and I think when we were rolling it out, the concern was folks weren't going to use it. And now you try to take that away from districts that use it, and you would have a mutiny on your hands because parents rely on that so heavily. Are there other pieces of software that you all are considering putting in place, like an app, that you just think you can't do without going into the future? Rodney?
Well, one of the complaints that I kept hearing when I arrived here at Mount Airy, a small school district that I'm assisting, is bus discipline. Felt like that was running drivers off, and so they started this complicated. Yeah, it's a huge one. And so we were doing Google Forms, and usually Google Forms makes your life easier, and it would populate into a spreadsheet, and then it was sent to the administrator to school, and then it was sent right back through with emails. It was just too much of a drivers having to write it on a piece of paper. We were having to enter it on the Google form, going in the spreadsheet. So what we're now looking at is a bus conduct app that we're going to go to here in Mount Airy. We're going to try to get it off the ground this year. And we're hoping that's going to make the life easier for a driver. We're hoping that the communication piece being all in one, to where once it is sent to the administrator, it comes right back through and it finishes back at the driver. They know what's going on. So we continue to hear that I'm leaving if you don't take care of these kids. I can't control them anymore. I turn them in, nothing is being done. So that's one of the issues I do think that we have across the nation. Drivers just don't want to drive anymore because of the liability, the abuse, things that are not being handled. And I'm not saying that all school districts are that way. Seatbelts, that's another argument that we could get into at some other point in time of whether you're for it or not, but it does seem to help with discipline if it's being used. But bus conduct app is something that we're looking at that's new, that we've never had before.
That's I'm glad you bring that up, because that is probably it used to be pay, right? Pay was a reason why people would say I can't work here anymore. I think probably now it's as much discipline as is any single thing that folks struggle with, and that's so to have a way to address that. I think, Rodney, is huge. I think that's just a huge issue.
One more thing before Deb jumps in. I'm sorry, but we've even invested in bringing sociologists, psychologists. We've brought trainers in here to teach drivers how to adapt with certain behaviors with kids, and it makes a difference. it's money well spent. It's money that you didn't think you'd ever have to spend in your transportation dollars, but it's something that we're all going to have to look at some point in the future to kind of keep our drivers here. And it made a difference for a little while. And of course, it kind of trickles right back to where we were. And then you've got to keep that training in place.
Right, right.
Our county doesn't have any new apps necessarily that we're looking into, but we have apps that we are not utilizing to their potential. We're using apps that we use as little as 10%, as much as maybe 70% of what it offers. And so we're looking at finding that time, which is so precious, to get to know our existing products even better, so that we know that we're using it to its full capacity. So even the bus tracking app that we currently have, we have schools that will call us and say, hey, do you know where my bus is? And I'm like, well, how come you don't know where your bus is? Get on the app. How come you haven't downloaded it yet? Again, immediate data. Is your fuel gauge right? Do you really only have a quarter tank left, or are you at half a tank and with 50 more miles to go? So there's a lot of things that we have, and a lot of things that we're looking into, that we just have to keep in mind and be disciplined in what we do. Is if you have it, or if you're gonna have it, make sure you know what all the capabilities are, and make time, invest the time to train yourself and your staff, and then your families and your schools on how to use it, so you can get the biggest bang for your buck.
Makes a lot of sense, Deb, and I couldn't agree more. And I think about the budget issues that you brought up a little bit earlier. One of the things that I always used to try to do when I was selling an idea from a budget perspective is that I always try to tie it back to how it benefits the students. If you can, it may benefit transportation, but how is it going to benefit that student's education? And if you can somehow tie students' education into the budget piece, I think people listen more when you're able to do that. So budget issues now, what are you both seeing with regard to budget? I know the ESSER funds, I don't know about other states. I think North Carolina, I guess they were federal funds. Mm-hmm. I don't even know what the ESSER stood for. It was something to do with COVID, I'm quite sure. But the bottom line was the states received funding that was in excess of what they normally received to be able to try to get these kids that had fallen off during the COVID time, their learning curve had gone down, or they had a gap between what they should have known and what they knew. And so that money was provided, and I think that money has now run out. And so what kind of challenges are you facing from those funds no longer being available? Because I know we were able to spend some of that money during my time because I was there when those funds were available. What are you guys seeing with that these days?
Well, here that hit us hard because we used some of that money. Well, we used all of that money really for a lot of summer programs, anything in excess that would give transportation for children that wasn't part of the regular curriculum. We also were able to use local funds to provide incentives for recruitment and retention. We had an attendance bonus that's no longer here. So you have to be, and Rodney, you alluded to this much earlier, you have to be creative in the ways that you recognize and value your staff, and ways that are free. So for us to offset that lost money and still recruit and retain, we're promoting the amazing culture that we have here, and we're also recognizing our staff in any possible way that we can. And we went from, I can't remember, I've been here 17 years, I can't remember, but maybe one or two times that the transportation department was recognized by the board. And this year alone, we had 8 recognitions at board meetings of transportation staff. We've had national recognition through different places, and that is personal and to the employee receiving it, and it's contagious, and it makes others want to feel that way. And hopefully that means that they'll work a little harder or stay a little longer or come to us when other neighboring districts don't offer those opportunities. But we also, and I'm sorry I'm getting long-winded here, but from the mechanics side, from the shop, with our budget cuts, our assistant director has done a really good job of, again, going through and asking well, why are we only using this vendor, or why are we not exploring different ways? We're doing more things in-house. We're identifying the unique skills that some of our mechanics have so that we can tap into it and pay less outside and do things more in-house.
One thing for sure, if you're gonna contract things out, it's gonna cost you. Mm-hmm. It's gonna cost you, and it's gonna cost you a lot more than it would if you can do it inside. I believe that. Rodney, how about for you, pal?
Well, you're right. The ESSER funds have gone away, and it's not really directly impacted most school districts in transportation, but indirectly it has, due to the fact that you may be getting some local money that has supplemented your operation to where now that local money is needed in the classroom to where it can't be used in operations. So therefore, the district I'm currently working with here back at home, it was a mandate. You find ways to cut money in your budget. And we had to back off of technology, unfortunately, to where Mount Airy, we had an initiative here, Scott, 5 years ago, of this smart bus pilot in North Carolina, to where we were able to add on student tracking, turn-by-turn navigation and all that. And Mount Airy's had to back off of that and just go back to the basics of GPS, your routing platform, and then the app to track buses for parents. I mean, we just had to back off some of that. And so we've had to back up on that. And then I see other school districts that are having the same issue, even larger ones, to where central office personnel, boards of education, they're going to have to listen to transportation departments, work with them when it comes to the bill schedules. Routing, right. You're going to have staggered bills, which most large school districts have, but even rural districts are going to have to start looking at staggered bill times to possibly save money, to where you're putting more kids on the bus, even though they're running multiple routes. You're going to have to look at that.
I agree with that, Rodney. And I think, if you're really, really, really rural, then a multi-tier bill schedule is going to be harder to do. But even in the rural side of the county I'm in, we have a 2-tier bill schedule on one side and a 3-tier bill schedule on the other, because it's more urbanized on the western side of the county and more rural on the east side. So I think you've got to be very, even in rural places, sometimes you got to look at the possibility of maybe doing even 1 or 2 schools, or maybe you got to ride some schools together, whereas you never rode those schools on the same bus. I mean, some of those things you have to start looking at in order to be able to manage your budget satisfactorily and get where you need to go. Guys, we are running short on time. I can't believe it.
Thank you, everyone, for being in attendance. Rodney, Deb, on behalf of the BusPlanner team, really, really appreciate you taking the time and joining us, and a lot of great insights, folks. I really appreciate the time.
It was our pleasure. Thank you for having me, and I'm sure, Rodney, you say the same.
Absolutely. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
All right. Thank you, guys.